if we know what we would die for, what are the principles that are more important than life to us, then, God, there's so much less grip of the fear. Because if I've thought through, like, I would die for this, then what can you threaten me with? And so I think that's one of the things I got from studying these dialogues, to try to understand, like, how do I want to be in this situation that we're in?
Hello and welcome to the New Thought Men's podcast, where we're building healthy masculinity in the world. It's great to have you with us. I'm Eamon, and today's guest is Asa Henderson. So let me share a little bit about Asa. He runs the YouTube channel Philosophy for a Small Planet, with a focus on practical philosophy for life, environmental ethics, and the philosophical ideas in popular movies and books. Asa has been involved with men's work for over 20 years. He is co-founder of the Journey to Manhood Online.com, Journey to Manhood Online.com, a digital resource for young men to find meaning and purpose in life. He is also the father of an awesome teenager. Asa, welcome, brother. Welcome back, I should say.
It's great to be here, Eamon.
Yeah, great to have you on. I just so appreciate you. One other thing I want to share about Asa is that he does a lot of our video work. He works with me a lot. We've known each other for 15, 20 years, something like that. We've been in a men's group together. So just amazing all-around person. I'm so grateful, Asa, that you're part of this community and that you're part of my life, bro.
Yeah, me too. You know, it's like you coming into my life was one of the great friendships, you know.
Thank you, brother. I feel the same way. So let's get into it. You did a talk for our summit, and the title was, let me get this right, How to Face Tyranny from Socrates to Thoreau, which is awesome. I know you're into, the philosophers and the Stoics and the ancient wisdom. So I'm so glad to have that voice in our summit, and I think this one is just poignant. It's where we're at kind of right now, unfortunately, as a country of the United States, and everyone's kind of watching kind of some of what looks like craziness. I think I wish I were watching it from the outside, but unfortunately, we're watching it from the inside.
Yeah.
And so let's go ahead and just start out with Socrates, because that's where you kind of started, and then we can talk a little bit about Thoreau, and then there'll be some other stuff in there. But so Socrates was kind of that. I mean, he's most well known for the Socratic method, obviously named after him, for asking kind of those foundational questions and then just allowing the person to go ahead and explain themselves. And he stood up to tyranny, and it ultimately led to his death. So why don't you just fill us in with a little bit of background as to Socrates, where this tyranny was coming from ancient Greece at the time, and how did he engage that?
Yeah, so I mean, I'll start with why I decided to, do this topic and then look there for answers, because like I'm here with everybody else watching what's happening and seeing like, oh crap, like this could get really bad. And but I know enough about history and about philosophy to know that we're not the first people who have been in this situation. You know, there have been many, many tyrannical and oppressive governments throughout the history of humankind, and there have been some really smart people and wise people who have dealt with that situation and written down their thoughts. So I went to Socrates because he is kind of the cornerstone in a way of all of Western philosophy. You know, he we actually divide ancient Greek philosophy into the pre-Socratics and the post-Socratics, because Socrates was kind of the turning point, and the people who were before Socrates were mostly interested in like, what is the world made of, and like, what does the cosmos look like, and you know, is the world made of water, or is it made of fire, or is it like, you know, kind of natural philosophy, like what is this place that we live in? But Socrates really
pre-science kind of thing.
Yeah, it was sort of like proto-science.
Yeah.
It was like,
Okay.
let's try and figure out what this world is that we're living in.
This? What's going
on? And Socrates really shifted it to be more focused on how to live a good life. You know, there were these virtues that people talked about in ancient Greece. You know, they talked about prudence or wisdom, and they talked about, you know, courage, and they talked about justice, and you know, a lot of the same things that we talk about now. Yeah. But Socrates would kind of go around to people who sort of claimed to have these qualities. You know, they claimed to be courageous, or they claimed to be wise, or, you know, leaders in society who claimed that they knew how people should live, and asked them, well, okay, so you're courageous. What is courage? And of course, nobody could really give him a satisfactory answer. And whatever answer they did give, he would ask more questions, and then ultimately show that they didn't really know what they were talking about. And so, you know, of course, this annoyed people, especially powerful people.
Sure.
People don't really like that when you show that they don't know what they're talking about.
Yeah. I don't. Are we seeing any living proof of that these days? I'm sorry, that was a rhetorical question.
Yeah, no, we're all past that now. Yeah. You know, yeah. No, if we were all past it, then I wouldn't have to go look at Socrates to
right.
get answers to our current situation. And so, what was going on in Greece at the time? Like, it's very complicated history. I don't really know all of it, but there was a whole long war between Athens and Sparta that kind of like kept reigniting, and then they would make peace, and then they had to fight again. And at the time that Socrates was executed, Athens had lost the war, and Sparta imposed the government of the 30 tyrants, which were 30. I guess they were Athenians, but Sparta kind of like put them in power. And they were pretty violent and repressive. And I read somewhere that they killed 5% of the population of Athens.
Wow.
So yeah, pretty brutal. So luckily we're not there now. Like, it's nice to have some perspective that things could actually be even quite a lot worse than we have them currently. Yeah. But we hope it doesn't get there, and that's kind of why I wanted to look like, what can we do to make sure that things don't get worse than they are now. Yeah,
this is an important conversation right now. Absolutely.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
And then, you know, the post-Socratics, after Socrates kind of like made this turn towards ethics and towards what does it mean to live a good life as a human being. There were kind of four schools that branched off of that after Socrates. There was Plato, who is the main person that we know about Socrates through. Plato wrote down a bunch of dialogues that starred Socrates, and some of them, it seems like, are more likely what Socrates was actually saying, and some of them are more Plato using Socrates as a mouthpiece. But Plato was more interested in kind of like a certain kind of metaphysics of like, what are the basic realities of like justice and courage. And so Socrates would ask these questions. And so Plato got really interested in like, what are those things? And he came up with the idea of the Platonic forms of like goodness and truth and justice. And he kind of spawned a more mystical school. And then there was the skeptics who really focused on this idea that Socrates had, that I don't know. The only thing I know is I don't know anything. So Socrates said that, and the skeptics were like, okay, that's our philosophy. The only thing we know is we don't know anything, and we're just going to tell everyone else how much they don't know anything either. And then there was the Stoics, who really took this idea of virtue is the most important thing very seriously. That the only thing that matters in life is virtue and being a good human being, and no matter what else happens to you, if you're enslaved or killed or your family is killed, as long as you have virtue, you have the most important thing in life. They're pretty hardcore, but they're making a resurgence now, I think, for a good reason.
Yeah, I was going to say, we're seeing a lot of people talking about the Stoics right now, and I see why now. Yeah, that's good information. Awesome.
And then the Epicureans were more interested in like, they have a different idea of how to live a good life, but we don't really need to get into the Epicureans right now because it's not really a topic of the podcast.
Okay. Sounds good. Well, tell us a little bit more about Socrates and kind of, his ideal, of standing up to tyranny. I know that his trial and imprisonment and ultimate death, was him standing up and living by that principle of like, hey, here are my virtues. I believe in, this state. I believe in, our country. I'm going to stand up for that. And that's the greater thing to be of service to, even if it means my death. I was like, okay, that is commitment.
Yeah. Well, and one thing that Socrates and Thoreau have in common is really valuing the voice of conscience. Thoreau actually uses the word conscience. Socrates has a different way of framing it, but he said that he received divine guidance. Basically, he had a god, or in Greek, a daemon, which is different from a demon. It's like a spirit that would speak to him and would tell him. He said it didn't tell him what to do, but it would tell him what not to do. So it would tell him when something wasn't the right path. And I think a lot of people would recognize that we also have some kind of inner voice.
Yeah.
I definitely have noticed that, and it takes some effort to tune into. It's not like, it's important, I think, to make a distinction between the true voice of conscience, or the true voice of genuine moral principles, and common sense, or like our programming. Yeah. Like, we might agree with a lot of our programming, but it's still programming, and it's not the same thing.
Yeah.
There's a strong pull that human beings have to go along with what people around us believe and think and say, and it takes a good deal of effort and thought and even meditation and courage to really listen to that inner voice of conscience and act on it.
Yeah, meditation is a way, and certainly one of our tools in New Thought. I think it's a powerful way to find that silence, to find that still voice, that when we get still, there is that voice of intelligence. Ernest Holmes called it the one voice, or the one mind. And that is it. And we're also encouraged to not only sit and listen and be in the silence and listen to that voice, but also act on it. I love that part, because Ernest Holmes said, we not only treat or use affirmative prayer, but we're not only holding the higher vision, but we are, treat and move your feet. We need to put this into action. How do we bring this into our lives in a powerful way? So listening to that inner voice and acting on that inner voice, I would say Ernest Holmes is definitely in there, in the same consciousness as Socrates. Yeah, how do we bring this into our lives? How do we bring this into the world?
One thing that I really like about New Thought, I consider myself an agnostic Gnostic. That's what I call myself. By which I mean that I don't know, but I think it's possible to know. I don't put a limit on what can be known. And I think that through inner exploration, we can discover truths about what's out there metaphysically. But one of the things I like about New Thought is the focus on thought and how much we shape. So I did a meditation that's available in the New Thought Men's community, which is about going behind the point of awareness in our minds. And I actually based this meditation on Plato's allegory of the cave, where you have people. The allegory of the cave is that the people are just sitting there looking at these shadows on a wall, and they think that's reality.
I hope you're enjoying this podcast. To connect with our community of like-minded men and access our full library, including summit talks, meditations, podcasts, weekly online men's groups, and so much more. Become a member today at newthoughtmens.community/membership. And now back to the podcast.
So this is us. This is us in the physical world. Like the things that we're seeing, that's the shadows on the wall of the cave. And if you turn around, then you see that actually there's a fire in the back of the cave, and there's people with like shadow puppets, and they're casting these shadows on the wall of the cave. But then that's not actually the reality. The reality is you walk past the people with the shadow puppets, past the fire, up out of the cave, and then you see the actual world. And then there's even a further step beyond that, which is that. So that actual world is for Plato, it's the world of the forms, of the ideas, the basic ideas that are kind of like in the mind of creation. You might say. I don't know if he would say it that way, but and then you look at the sun. The sun is that which allows us to perceive these basic principles or forms, and that is what Plato identifies with the good. And it's like hard to even comprehend what he's even referring to. But
I like it. It's kind of the metaphor of the light, It's like
exactly.
Our lightness, our light beingness, or our higher self, or the soul, is that source. And the fire kind of can represent that to us, but it's not the real thing. It's still a part of the shadow puppets that are on the cave, and the cave allegory anyhow. Yeah.
So yeah, the sun is kind of like the light of consciousness. That and you could even say it's the light of consciousness in the mind of God, or the mind of creation.
Nice. Like it.
And I was going somewhere with that. I'm trying to remember where I was going.
Okay.
But when I did that meditation myself to kind of try it out before I gave it to a bunch of people, I had this experience that, wow, there's this tremendous potential, this tremendous power behind my awareness. And when I think, I'm shaping that power. I'm shaping that potential that I am every time that I have a thought.
That's our creative. How I would phrase that as a New Thought person is that is our creative essence. The reflectivity of the cosmos is how I refer to it. I'm not a big God fan, so I don't use that very much. But the creativity of the universe is reflected in us through our own thoughts, through our own feelings, and through our own expression, just like the cosmos creating all of these universes and galaxies and planetary systems, and then suns and, planets that may have, like Earth, people on it, and conscious beings, and animals and plants, and all these amazing, incredible things that we're a part of. So, that is, and in that world, we get to create, we get to practice what the cosmos is practicing. So it's almost this microcosm, macrocosm experience of the reflectivity of our creativity is reflected because the cosmos is a creative place, and we come from this creative source, and that through those thoughts, through our actions, through our feelings, through our intention, through all of that, we are manifestors, we are creators. And so we are all creators on that level. So that's the new thought kind of thing. We are creators.
Yeah, and when I use the word God, I mean something different than most people think of when they hear it. So I tend to avoid it. But
yeah, everybody has a different perception of God. That's why I don't use it. You say God, and everybody goes off into their own little world. Oh, this is what it means. Maybe not. That's why I go for that abstract, like thinking about the cosmos. We talked about this on another podcast that you were there with, and it's like, it's so abstract, the mind can't wrap itself around that, Whereas God, my upbringing would say, it's this old guy in the clouds, taking notes, good and bad, which is the Santa Claus to a child. I get it. But, because I don't, that gets evoked still because it was so entrained when I was growing up that I just don't use it. Because that's what it evokes for me, this limited, small little box that we can fit it into. And the cosmos being, multi-universes and multiverses and all of this thing that we can't even conceive our galaxy, much less our universe, much less the multiverse, much less everything in existence that cosmos really represents. So for me, it's a great way to stretch my brain. It's a great way to think about it in the sense, and I love how the native peoples talk about it, is the great mystery, because it should be that mystery. There should be the unknown part of it, to know everything. How could we possibly understand that? How can we possibly know that? We can barely understand our own life and this world, to a degree. So, so that really helped me expand my awareness around what is this universal principle? What is this life force? What is this consciousness that's in, through, and as everything? And we can put it into some different terms. Where is it? That intelligence is everywhere, that that consciousness is everything, and that because we're a part of that everything, we're a part of that. And so literally everything is about creation and creativity. I'll find it, but go ahead.
Yeah, well, and if you want to explode your idea of God, just read some philosophy. When you start to study philosophy and if you actually look, there's a lot of philosophers who talk about God, but when you look at what they say, they all mean something a little different.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know. I mean, it's funny. Every podcast we're like, we try to avoid the God language because we want to be inclusive, and here we are just talking about God.
I think it's important to actually have conversations about it, because it doesn't come up a lot in our community or in this New Thought community, specifically the New Thought men's community, because what we see is that so many people are leaving those religions. So many people are, and it's really associated with organized religion, oftentimes the religion of our upbringing. And it puts us, it puts me, let me speak to my experience. It puts me back in that child place of, being, supplicating and, rather than being a part of that experience, we take ourselves out from it. We're outcasts. We look at the Bible and the creation myths that are like, oh yes, and then God created the planet, and then he created all the stuff and human beings, and then the woman ate the apple, and then now we have a scapegoat, and it's just for me, it just doesn't resonate at all. And so it's good for us to have these kinds of discussions, because I feel as a society, we're moving away from this. We're moving into this greater context. Even if we think about it, God was the next thing, right? And so we weren't able to fly back in ancient Greece. So of course, God's going to be up on the clouds. We don't know what those clouds are about. We don't know what's up there. Well, now we have airplanes. Now we have, spaceships, so now God is becoming this, for me anyhow, has to become this bigger thing than, it has to be the cutting edge of our consciousness. And so really when people say God, we're living in 2000 years ago. And their conception of God, because it was that big at the time. But now that we've expanded our awareness and, we've explored space and we've got the Hubble telescopes and that can see the edge of the universe. That's just crazy to me, that something like that, and I don't know if that's actual or if that's still theoretical at this point. But it's like, and then beyond that, the great mystery, the greater mystery that we're all a part of. That sounds exciting to me. That sounds like you can't put it in the fancy, nice little box and say, okay, there it is. We're done. Let's call it.
Yeah, I like the great mystery. I think
so. We have
great.
to explore it. Yeah,
I like using the great mystery.
Yeah, thanks for that caveat into that, because it's good. It's good to talk about it, and now we can let it go and move on.
Actually, to kind of segue back to what we were talking about, one of the charges against Socrates in his trial was that he didn't believe in the gods that Athens believed in. Like he had some different idea of God, and actually Aristophanes, the comic playwright, wrote a comedy about where Socrates is a character, and he's like trying to say that the clouds are the gods. So you mentioned the clouds. So, but anyway, back to Socrates' trial.
Back to Socrates. Yes. I love some of his quotes here. Better to die than betray your goodness. And I'm paraphrasing, obviously, because I'm dyslexic.
Yeah. So this is also a paraphrase, but in the Apology, which is Plato's rendition of what Socrates said at his trial, he made the argument that we don't know whether death is good or bad, because nobody knows what happens after death. But we know that doing evil is bad. So it's better to die than to do evil.
Yeah. We could take that one to heart these days.
Yeah. And I think that fundamental idea, which he elaborates in the next two dialogues of Plato, the Crito and the Phaedo, there's these are the three dialogues that chronicle Socrates' trial, imprisonment, and death. The Apology, the Crito, and the Phaedo. And Socrates elaborates more on why it's so much more important to him to be wise and virtuous, to kind of hold to these moral principles than to live. He would rather hold to his principles and live. I mean, and he'd rather hold to his principles and die than betray his principles and live.
Yeah. Powerful notion. Yeah. And, I guess one of his philosophy, like the unexamined life is not worth living, stressing the pursuit of knowledge and virtue as the path to the good life. Love it. And, we're so, in New Thought, we're so focused on the good because that's what we want more of. And to examine what are our values? What do we believe? And even on the personal level, that's important as well. Like, what do I believe? If I'm a part of this philosophy, if this is the thing for me, and it is for me anyhow, then what is that? What is that belief? And what does New Thought believe? And then what do I believe? And what is the alignment and maybe not unalignment on some levels with that? And to really know ourselves, to really have that deep understanding of what are my virtues, what would I be willing to die for? I think is where he was at, and I think it is.
Yeah.
perfect.
And I think that's a really important question right now.
Yeah.
Because the way that tyranny works is through fear.
Yeah.
A person can accumulate so much power by instilling fear in others. And
We're seeing
if we know what we would die for, what are the principles that are more important than life to us?
Yeah.
Then, God, there's so much less grip of the fear.
Yeah.
Because if I've thought through, like, I would die for this, then what can you threaten me with?
Yeah.
And so I think that's one of the things I got from studying these dialogues, to try to understand, like, how do I want to be in this situation that we're in?
Yeah. How do I want to show up in our modern world, given the situation that we're in?
Well, it's like, I'm afraid if I say the wrong thing, I'll be canceled on social media, or,
Right.
like, some friends and acquaintances might not talk to me anymore if I have the wrong opinion about something, or, to take it to another level, I might get arrested.
Mm-hmm.
But if I know that there's certain things that I would die for, then the volume on all that other stuff gets turned down. And actually, Henry David Thoreau did get arrested for his beliefs. He refused to pay his taxes because he didn't believe in supporting a government that allowed slavery. And also the government was currently at that point in the midst of a war that the US started with Mexico, basically to take most of the Western United States was taken in that war, Mexican-American War.
Yeah.
And he opposed those things, so he refused to pay his taxes. He got put in jail, and a friend bailed him out, and he was like, that was not his choice to be bailed out. But he wrote in Civil Disobedience, he wrote about this whole episode and why he did it. And it's very powerful to read, especially right now.
Yeah. Yeah. Thoreau. Before we get too deep into that, I want to go just circle back to Socrates, because you brought up this thing that I think is really important right now. Before his execution, the day before his execution, some friends came and he talked about pain and pleasure. And kind of there's something greater than that. And it feels like our society is stuck in that pain pleasure mode right now.
Mm-hmm.
Can you talk a little bit about what he said, or what the wisdom was there?
Yeah. So there's this moment in the Phaedo, the dialogue by Plato called the Phaedo, that I really love, which is, the kind of setting for the dialogue is that this is the day that Socrates is going to be executed. He was condemned to drink hemlock and die. So he drank his own poison that was kind of administered to him. But that happens in the evening, and so in the morning, a bunch of his friends come and for kind of like one last conversation with Socrates, and there's this moment where he's kind of let out of his cell by the jailer, and the jailer takes off his chains from his ankles, and he's like rubbing his ankles, and he says, it's interesting how pain and pleasure always seem to follow one another. It's as if they were joined at the head, like they're two brothers who are joined at the head, and the gods weren't able to separate them, because every time you get pleasure, pain is going to follow, and every time you have pain, pleasure follows. Because he's in this moment where like you can imagine having manacles on your ankles or chains, and like your circulation is hindered, or you've got these metal things digging into your ankles, and then you let them off, and it's like this pleasure of the blood coming back, and the and so it's kind of like this just little moment that doesn't seem like it's part of the philosophy of the dialogue, but really it's like central, I think, because the whole rest of the dialogue is about these ideas like justice and beauty and truth, and basically what are known as the Platonic forms or ideas, and like what are the essences of these things, and how do we know them? And Socrates is saying that, well, when we die, when we're separated from the body, then our mind is able to fully commune with these ideas. Now, I don't know if I think that's true exactly, but and I think there is some criticism to be brought to how much Socrates kind of denigrates the body, but also I think, if more to the point of what we're talking about here, that when we're trapped in seeking pleasure and avoiding pain, then it takes us away from really comprehending and acting upon genuine moral principles. And it also makes us easier to control. Like we're talking about tyranny. It's easy to control people through pleasure and pain, but if you're no longer attached to pleasure and pain, then you're a lot harder to control.
Yeah. And that's really, this kind of, reptilian brain back here is really the pain pleasure center. If we can get that energy out of that, safety and survival, out of that, fight, flight, out of that, space of instinctual reaction, and move it into the prefrontal cortex, where the logical thinking part can happen, when we're able to take a breath and move into, yes, why is this? What is this? Then we can actually look at things in a more logical, in a more linear, in a more realistic way. And not to mention, the pineal gland, and looking at it from that spiritual perspective. That's the metaphor of the third eye, is being able to see it from that that almost what you talked about in your meditation is going to that observer, and going, oh yeah, okay, let me see it from a detached place, from I'm not a part of this body, or witnessing what's going on in the body, or witnessing what's going on in the reptilian brain, or even the thinking brain, the prefrontal cortex, to have that unique perspective of pulling back and seeing it from a very different place, and the allegory of the cave that we talked about.
Yeah, and when we move from the reptilian brain or the lower brain into the prefrontal cortex and a more integrated brain state, it's not just more logical, but it's also more compassionate.
Yeah.
We're able to have more compassion for ourselves, and we're able to have more compassion for other people, and we're able to be more inclusive with our compassion as well.
Yeah, I was just looking up, Socrates believed the soul is immortal and is the true essence of a person, separate from the body. So he had that kind of disconnection, almost from the body, like there is something greater here going on. And I kind of like his perspective on that. I think it aligns with New Thought to a degree, or maybe even to a large degree, not knowing the full understanding of what he did believe. But us believing, hey, we're lucky we get to inhabit this physical form, and we are this more subtle body. We are this consciousness. We are this spirit, if you want to, or soul, that has moved from maybe body to body over time since the beginning of creation, that we've been around for a long time. We're a part of that Big Bang. In fact, the Big Bang is what really was like the dispersion of the one into the many, and that allows for individualized experience, and that informs this divine understanding to be able to have this diversity of experience. So we were experiencing one thing, oneness, wholeness, all of that. Well, what would it be like to experience diversity? And then boom, here we go. If the Big Bang, happened because of a rise in consciousness or something like that, that the oneness consciousness wanted to be the many consciousness to fully experience all of the experience of that was possible in the newly formed cosmos. But I digress a little bit. Squirrel. I want to talk about your upcoming book, the 3 criteria for moral principles that you went through in the book, or will go through in the book when it's done. Abstract, the 3 criteria for moral principles: abstract, universal. Okay, you're gonna have to say it, Asa.
All right. Yeah. So abstract, universalizable,
and inclusivity.
and inclusive.
Yeah.
So the book is about how to use ethics to tell stories that change the world. So it's a book for writers, people who write stories, write fiction, and because I think stories are really how, I love philosophy, but stories are how we really pass on our ethics. And it's like parents don't read their kids Aristotle when they're going to sleep. They read them storybooks, and the storybooks are, all of them have morals. For most of the storybooks for little kids, they have a moral, and humans learn through stories. So in trying to help writers kind of understand the ethics of their characters and the ethics in their stories, we kind of created these 4 different dimensions of an ethical principle. And so those 3 are abstract, meaning, so saying, don't shoplift at the corner store. That's very concrete. stealing is bad is a little more abstract.
Oh, gotcha.
Okay. And freedom is very abstract. Truth, like these kind of things that we think of as basic moral principles, care. And I think abstraction is important because it helps us build bridges. Because like take the example of freedom, that can be interpreted very differently on the right versus on the left. Like on the right, they talk about the right to bear arms as freedom to own a gun. On the left, there's freedom to get an abortion. And people disagree very much on which freedoms who should have, but like they both believe in freedom. And I think I'm taking a sort of controversial position here, but I think that actually building bridges is an important way to resist tyranny. Because I had this really interesting experience recently where on my YouTube channel, I started to get a bunch of comments from people on the right. And I realized, oh, they're just as scared of the left as the left is of them. They're afraid that people on the left are going to destroy the country. They're afraid because, people on the left do say things like I have friends who are on the left of me who say the United States is fundamentally racist and broken, and there's no way to fix it. And the only thing we can do is dismantle it. Now, if you love this country, then that's scary. And I had somebody on my YouTube say, I want martial law so we can get rid of all the communists who want to destroy this country and bring us back to the 1930s. Now that's like the stereotype, that's the stereotype of what those people think. But like, he is so scared.
That's out of fear.
And like, I can't say that there aren't people on my side who have given him reason to be that afraid. I think he's blowing it out of proportion, and where he wants to go, I don't want to go there. But what I'm saying is that the polarization feeds the tyranny. And I don't know if I could build a bridge all the way to where he is. But there's another guy in the comments who is like, yeah, I voted for the current president because my apartment was a lot less expensive when he was president before. And like that guy I could build a bridge with. And I think that building those bridges shows that there's not as much to be afraid of. And maybe we don't want to throw out the basic principles that our country was founded on because we're so scared of those other people.
Right. Or based on
that's
those.
what's
Go ahead.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yeah. That's where we're at is like, are we willing to throw out the basic ideas of equality and, life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness and freedom of speech? Like these basic things that most Americans can agree on, those basic moral principles. Some people are willing to throw those out in order to win against the other people. Because they're so scared. And so to get back to abstractness, like when we go to the abstract moral principle of freedom, then that allows us to build a bridge. Like I believe in freedom, you believe in freedom. And we don't do we want to sacrifice that? For the sake of winning on the more concrete things.
On the small things, we're sacrificing the big thing. Beautiful, Asa. Beautiful, Asa, bro.
So yeah, that was abstract. So then we have universalizable, and
okay,
here, like philosophers love big words. And
That was
dyslexics
tough.
hate big words, so I apologize.
That was a tough one for my little neurodiverse brain. It's okay.
But I haven't been able to come up with a shorter word that conveys this concept. And it goes back to Immanuel Kant and his basic contribution to philosophy, to ethical philosophy, is what he calls the categorical imperative. Another big word, don't need to remember that. But it's the idea that any true moral principle is something that would work if everyone did it. So, example that Kant uses, I think, is lying. Like if everyone lied, then lying wouldn't work anymore, because lying only works when someone believes that what you're saying is true. And if everyone lied, then no one would believe what anybody is saying is true. So if you're like, well, I'm just going to lie in this situation because I feel like that's going to be a better outcome in this situation. But if you think about what would happen if everybody lied, then you can't will that everyone would act according to that principle. Whereas everyone telling the truth might get a little awkward sometimes, but you could imagine a world where everyone tells the truth, and that might actually be a better world. And then inclusivity, which is where I think people get tripped up. Like we are naturally a tribal organism. I mean, that's, you might not believe that, but I kind of do. Like, I think that we developed as a way of surviving. We create groups, and like, this is also where all of these moral principles are born, is in the group. Like, how do we collaborate as a group? But we developed them in the context of small groups, and where other small groups might want to kill us and take our stuff. And so it's easy to be kind of insular in how we apply our moral principles. We can be like, voting is good for white property owning males. And I mean, that in fact was our society,
our history.
The United States. Like, we have these beautiful ideals of life, liberty, and the pursuit of all happiness, and all men are created equal. And then we didn't include even all the men. We only included the white ones who own property. And this kind of gets to what story do we want to tell about the United States? Like, do we want to, like, at the beginning of the United States, we had those principles, and we had a huge amount of institutionalized racism. And we have a debate going on in our culture right now of which of those things is more fundamental. Is the racism more fundamental, or is the principles more fundamental? And a point that I brought up in my talk is, if you believe any of New Thought, like if you think what we think matters and has any influence on what the world becomes, if you think America is a fundamentally racist country, what world does that create? Like, I understand why people think that. If you look at our history, there's a lot of racism in it. And there's still a lot of racism now. And that needs to be dealt with. But if you have the thought, and you speak the thought, and you share the thought, America is fundamentally racist, what does that create?
Creates divide. It creates disconnection. It associates us with the worst case scenario, rather than how do we find this greater case scenario, which is equality for everybody.
Exactly. And I mean, for sure alienates a lot of people, not just on the right, but in the middle. But it also, it kind of locks us in a way. And I think that, so Yuval Noah Harari in his book Sapiens says that like countries are just ideas that they're stories that we made up, like, and are continuing to make up. So what story we make up about our country is what our country is. And so do we want to make up a story that our country is irrevocably and fundamentally racist, or do we want to make up a story that our country is fundamentally about these moral principles that it was founded on? And it has fallen woefully short of those moral principles, you know, in many ways and many times throughout our history. But those moral principles are what is fundamental. Because ultimately, like, there's no right answer to that question about what is fundamental. It's just a story that we're creating. But I would rather create the story that the moral principles are fundamental, and then that empowers those principles to create more equality, to create more freedom, to create more, pursuit of happiness, to create more happiness.
An opportunity for everyone. And that's not saying that we can't have the conversation that says, hey, that's racist, or this is racist, or was I brought up in a society that, you know, models in movies and in all of this stuff, where a black man is the bad guy. You know, I mean, I grew up in the 80s, 90s. I mean, that was kind of, you know, I mean, there are exceptions, of course.
Or the first one to die in the horror movie.
Right. All of those.
Either expendable or a buffoon or a bad guy, or like there were certain stereotypes that kind of you had to be in.
It's not saying, we're not saying that, you know, we can't have these conversations, but I think it is like, is that our foundation? What is the foundation? Oh, we're fundamentally racist and that's the foundation. No, I think the fundamental ideals, for me anyhow, and I guess everyone would have to answer this question for themselves really, is what are we? What are we committed to? In the Constitution and the freedoms that we have. You know, for me, those are the foundational pieces. Those are how then do we go about building the equality? How do then we go about building the just society? How then do we go about leaning into the things that make us uncomfortable so that we can have the discussions, to have the healing, to have the thing that we truly want, all which is ultimately freedom and equality, opportunity, equal opportunity.
And you know, speaking of the Constitution and sort of the institutions of this country, I think Socrates makes a really interesting point about that as well, in relation to his country, in the dialogue called the Crito, which was in between when Socrates was condemned to death and when he was executed. And Socrates' friend Crito comes to him in his prison cell and offers to help him escape and flee to another city where he can live. And Socrates refuses to go. And his reason for this is interesting. And he says that the laws of the city, he owes a great debt of gratitude to the laws of the city, because they created the sort of social structure that allowed that he spent his entire life in. And I think on the left, for good reasons, we focus a lot on what's wrong with the systems that we have in our society, which, like, we want to change them and fix them and make them better. That's great. We should be wanting to make them better, but we sometimes forget to have gratitude for everything that we do have because of those structures and systems. They are not perfect. They could use a lot of improvement, but like I have lived a life basically free of fear for my personal physical safety. Like, granted, I live, I'm a white man living in Boulder, Colorado, like a fairly safe area of the country. So like there is what we would call privilege in that experience. But a lot of people don't have that no matter what stratum of society they're in. Like there's places in the world, and especially like there's places in the world where in order to have that physical security, you need to have like locks and armed guards. And even then, like if you leave your house, you have to fear for your life. And if you look at human history, like there's a lot of stuff that's happened that's like a lot of scary things. And so granted, the goods that our society creates are not evenly distributed. And that is something that I genuinely feel needs to be fixed, needs to be changed. But I think it's good to have some gratitude for the institutions that we have and the fact that they are able to change. We have the ability, like hopefully we still will in 3 years, but we live in a society that has institutions that can change without a huge amount of violence. And so I think we should be grateful for that and take advantage of that.
Yeah. I mean, when we're talking about, I'm sorry, I'm switching over to Thoreau a little bit here, but I think
this is a good point to switch over to Thoreau. Yeah.
Okay. What makes a man is following his conscience, and his book Civil Disobedience, and you mentioned, he really followed that and got arrested because, hey, I don't believe in this, so I'm not going to support it financially. But he also inspired, so many people, Martin Luther King, Gandhi, so many people who wanted to make a difference, and especially for, MLK and Gandhi in our tradition, we really honor those men that brought this idea forth of not only, having civil disobedience, standing for what we believe, but not willing to do violence to do it, violence to others, and to really stand in that power and that strength of saying, no, this is unacceptable. And I'm not going to hurt you. I'm not going to kill you over it, but I'm going to stand, even though you may try and kill me about it, over it. And for us, I think that is one of the amazing things and the powerful things, looking back at those two individuals and the movements that they created, and why that's so powerful. Because sooner or later, our humanity comes in and goes, oh my God. There's just this one scene in the movie Gandhi. It was just so powerful when they're walking in rows, and the next row comes up, and the next row comes up. They're walking into the salt factory, and they're just beating them with batons. They're just like beating them and throwing them off the road, and then other people are taking them to go bind the wounds, and then more, and it's just showing the degree and the amount of violence that's going on, and and even when Gandhi had the upper hand, he said no. We're going to support. We're not going to hit the UK. When they're down, when they're at war. Just so we can win. Instead, he said, "No, let's not do it right now." And then they finally had their moment in the sun where it was like, yes, okay, I'm gonna my suffering, my me fasting and not eating food until we are free, and then all of a sudden, this beloved figure changed everything. And, the society, they finally realized the cruelty that they were inflicting, and said, okay, we give up. Now, I want to be a part of that kind of a movement. Like, even if it means me getting hurt or me dying, not that I would want that. I mean, I enjoy life. I genuinely love life, but this conversation is really inspiring me and saying, yeah, what am I really standing for? What do I really believe? And am I willing to die for it? Yeah, I really am. This philosophy, and I'm not willing to kill for it.
Yeah. So that's actually the fourth dimension of a moral principle that we talk about in the book, which is enforcement. So we talked about universalizability. Like, if you think something's a genuine moral principle, you think everybody should do it.
Yeah.
And we kind of live in a culture right now where it's like taboo to say everybody should do something. But that's what a moral principle is. It's like, yeah, it'd be great if everybody did this. But then you have the question, well, what am I willing to do to get other people to do it? And what am I not willing to do to get other people to do it? And I think you're absolutely right. Martin Luther King and Gandhi are great examples of both really focusing on genuine moral principles and also having a limit to what they're willing to do. Because you don't want to betray your principle in trying to advance your principle. Yeah. Right. Like, and Martin Luther King, I think, is a great example because he called on those principles that were at the foundation of the United States. Like in his "I Have a Dream" speech, he says, when the writers of the Declaration of Independence and the Constitution wrote the words, "We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal and endowed with the inalienable rights of life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness." This was a promissory note written to us that we are now going to, we are calling this due. We're going to make this true. I obviously don't have the quote in front of me, so I probably got some of it wrong. He said, yes, black men as well as white men, but he was calling on those principles that he knew most Americans shared. And that was part of the power of his words. And then he put it into action, and they went out and they marched and they endured horrible treatment and violence without using violence in return. And that was part of what shifted the consciousness of the country. People watching that on TV and being like, this is not okay. And so,
sorry, go ahead.
Yeah. So I think he's a model for how to resist tyranny. It's making sure that you know what those principles are and that you're not willing to compromise or sacrifice the principle for the sake of the principle. Right. I mean, there's another phrase that's going around in my circles that I really can't stand, which is by any means necessary. And that's another one of those things that scares the other side and makes them be like, okay, well then we're going to do it by any means necessary.
Right. It just keeps escalating.
I don't believe that. I believe it's very important to distinguish your ends and your means. And I think it's important to act from a principle, and acting from a principle means you don't violate the principle. In your own actions.
Absolutely necessary. And we're there. Like we're right there. I feel like, the civil rights movement and, really we're at another level of that. We're at a time of change where the old wants to keep it, hey, this was the way it is. And the new is really coming in, and ultimately we can't stop it, I think, because of the consciousness around it and the readiness, especially of future generations. I'm very hopeful with their how they're showing up and who they are and what they're representing. It doesn't look the same, but this is a time of huge change, and it really is necessary. It's necessary for us to, like you said, fulfill that promise that all are created equal. That we all are created equal. And for us in New Thought, that goes back to principle. We're all spirit. There is no one greater or lesser in that experience. If that is the truth, which we believe it is, then how could we act differently? How could we say no, the billionaires deserve more because they have billions? Anyhow, yeah, Asa, this has just been a powerful conversation. I really appreciate it, and one that I think we're all having, it definitely internally, if not externally, and hopefully this will help encourage that conversation more, encourage that building of bridges and finding that common ground, and really standing in that experience of freedom for and equality, and the promises that our forefathers had put forth to all who are here in this country. It's a really exciting time, and a really messed up and scary time too, like it has all of it. And what I know about change, being a person who has had a lot of change in my life, as everybody has, lovingly or welcomingly or not, oftentimes change with me tends to come with claw marks of no, and then, oh, wait a minute, this is something better.
A little bit of kicking and screaming.
Right, kicking and screaming, exactly. And that's what our society is doing right now, kicking and screaming. Hey, we want to move away from these old models that no longer really serve. No, wait a minute, we don't want to lose those models, and specifically around masculinity and what makes a man, what makes a real man. It's no longer our ability to defend the community from the saber-toothed tiger. We are in a much more nuanced experience of who we're becoming, and much more complex. And it's not an easy transition. I think in some respects, we've never seen a change like this happening. And, like you said, in other ways, we've seen this throughout the experience of the human condition, change that happens, and the rise of tyranny and dictators and all of these things. And so let us engage that roadmap that has been put before us from these wise people like Socrates and like Thoreau, to be able to stand in our power, unified under those foundational principles, and not to lose those foundational principles because of this small caveat, because of this small thing. And that's not saying we can't have conversations around these small things to me, but maybe they're huge things to others. I understand. We all have different opinions. But how do we come together as a people and as a country and as a world? I mean, this is not the only crisis that we're going through. I know you're very much like myself, an environmentalist. And, how do we deal with climate change? How do we leave a better world for the future? You have a teenage son. I know this is high on your list of priorities, to be able to see, what can I do about that? And I love that, you engage that, and I engage that in my own ways. And I think everybody engages it in their own ways. Whether they're like, no, I don't believe in it, we're kind of seeing, science says, and we're kind of seeing the outcome of this. So, whether you believe in it or not, it's happening. And then how do we solve this? How do we, find a better way, find a new way so that future generations can flourish even greater than ours, which would be lovely. That's what my hope, anyhow.
Well, yeah, if you want an answer to that question, you can join the membership and look at my talk from last year, because that's what it was on.
Yeah, join our membership. Absolutely. We have over 100 videos that are just incredible. There's so much that you get by becoming a member of the New Thought Men's community. So if you're considering it, definitely look into it. We'd love to have you be a part of our community, and not like an arm's length part of our community, but genuinely welcome, and be a part of men's groups that we have, both in centers, in New Thought centers, and also online. We have so many different options for having these kinds of conversations in a safe space that really encourages that. How do we engage this evolution, this spiral upwards that we're working on? Which brings me to my final question for you. What does divine masculinity look like in the 21st century? Speaking of spiraling upwards, what wisdom do you have to share with us, Asa, on what that can look like and how we can show up for that? Well,
the true, honest answer in Socrates fashion is, I don't know. But I will attempt to give an answer that guys can take with them and play with and see if it makes sense, see if it resonates. I think, I could go with Thoreau's answer, which is that, I don't think he says it in exactly these words, but that what makes a man is following his conscience. Because kind of my working hypothesis is that tyranny can't take root when everyone is following their conscience.
Yeah.
And again, conscience is not the same as what your tribe thinks, right? So if you're on the left, conscience doesn't mean just following what everybody else on the left is saying. If you're on the right, conscience doesn't mean following what everybody on the right is saying. Like, even if the other side is doing something you think is really bad, conscience, it takes work to clarify what are your true moral principles, and are they genuine moral principles? And then it takes even more courage to actually act on them and speak from them. And your question is divine masculinity. So how does this relate to the divine? Well, I think that's where Plato comes in, where the what Socrates has to say in the Phaedo comes in, which is that these principles are kind of a ladder towards oneness, towards unity. Because when you get to that abstract, universalizable, inclusive principle, like, I think the hypothesis that Plato has, and I may be getting this wrong in terms of what Plato actually believed, but is that all of that emanates from that great unity. And fundamentally, I think morality is about a recognition that we're all one. And your true conscience is coming from that place, from that recognition of unity.
Yeah, and of course we in New Thought would say yes, because it's a fundamental principle that we all know that on some level that we're connected, that what we do to someone else, we're doing to ourselves. What we, what our experience is, has, been experienced so many times in so many unique and different ways. The struggles, the pains, the challenges, the successes, the joys, that we have evolved as a humankind because of this oneness, because of our interconnectedness. The idea of that rugged individualism is how we have created this society. The American society is kind of almost silly, because you can't do anything by yourself. We're so interconnected, and we're seeing this. We're actually seeing this right now, with our dependence on all the foreign goods, with our dependence on everyone else and everyone else's dependence on each other. This is truly a global issue these days and nowadays. And I think I love that great unity, as Socrates called it. Really, I would say that is oneness for me. And so he was tapping into a universal principle, like we were talking about earlier. When we meditate, when we get in touch with that higher nature, that higher understanding, we're getting in touch with that oneness, with that wholeness, with that interconnectedness, with that, all of that, all of the good stuff, love, peace, joy, health, happiness. Don't we all want that? Of course, on a true level. I think we all do want that good stuff for ourselves and for the people that live. And
I don't know if Socrates used the term the great unity, but certainly the Plato and some of his followers that are now referred to as Neoplatonists really did emphasize this idea of the one, the oneness.
Love it.
And yeah.
Awesome, bro. Oh man, what a great conversation, Ace.
Yeah.
So I just want to, you can find Ace. I just want to tell everybody where they can find you on YouTube at Philosophy for a Small Planet, Philosophy for a Small Planet on YouTube. And, just follow his channel, and as well as ours, you'll see all the these amazing podcasts, including Aces from last year, our awesome conversation that we had last year on our YouTube channel, New Thought Men's Community. And, you'll put out some information about the upcoming book launch for your book. Can you tell me the name?
So it's still a working title at this point, but it's Write Stories That Matter: How to Use Ethics to Tell Stories That Change the World.
Awesome. I've got a story brewing, so
by time this, I've been slow on getting a Substack started, but by time this podcast is out, I should have that up and going, and that'll be a great place to follow if you want to get information about the book when it comes out. Great. And we'll put a link in the description and all that.
Great. Awesome, Asa. Oh, I'm so grateful to have you here today. I'm so grateful for your friendship, brotherhood, and this amazing work that we get to do together. And having this conversation really helped me realize how aligned in some respects we are, how on the same page we are, even though, I'm very much the New Thought, minister, and you have your unique and amazing path, but I know you're doing amazing, excellent work. And I'm just grateful. Thank you for doing that. Thank you for being you.
Yeah, likewise. Thank you for being you. And may we all be divine men in the 21st century.
Right.
To the best of our ability.
Absolutely. Well, thank you for joining us today, everyone. There's more to come, so stay tuned in.